if you're watching on YouTube, you will see the feed come over, and it will be ABC News. Again, it will be ABC News. If you're listening online, you will see the logo pop up. And okay, hold on, they're coming on.
Hi, everyone. I'm Diane Macedo. We're coming on the air with breaking news. The Supreme Court has just issued a ruling on the NCAA and compensation for college athletes. The High Court has ruled the NCAA was violating antitrust law by capping what student athletes can receive by way of education-related gifts and benefits. The NCAA and its biggest athletic conferences wanted the justices to overturn a ruling abolishing the limits, saying it would erode the amateur nature of college sports and open the door to pay for play. But athletes argued the rules unfairly suppress their ability to be rewarded for valuable skills and abilities. Let's go to senior Washington reporter Devin Dwyer for a little bit more on the decision. Devin, there's a nuance here because this isn't about just paying athletes outright. It's about educational gifts. So can you just explain a little bit more about what this ruling means?
Yeah, Diane, I mean, this case is significant in that it's a sign that the dam has broken a little bit, at least legally, when it comes to paying or giving compensation to college athletes who long have complained that even coaches, commissioners of leagues have been making millions of dollars. Meanwhile, they have been limited only to their tuition, room, and board, and a very limited, modest $5,000 cap on things like computers, paid internships, study abroad, musical instruments. The Supreme Court today lifted that cap, said that cap on those education-related expenses violated antitrust laws. But the court didn't go further. They said that the existing rules banning compensation salaries for college athletes can remain in place, at least for now. So a big blow to the NCAA. They said this would be a slippery slope, but a victory for these college athletes looking for just a little bit more compensation for all their hard work there on the playing field. Diane?
And let's bring in senior national correspondent Terry Moran for a little bit more on how the Supreme Court reached this decision. What are the justices saying here, Terry?
Well, the justices did not take on the big question, which a lot of people are arguing about. Should college athletes just be paid a salary? They work incredibly hard. They make lots of money for a lot of colleges and universities. Shouldn't they get some salary, some amount of money? The court didn't reach that because they were only addressing a lower court opinion. College athletes had sued the NCAA saying these limits on education-related expenses that Devin was just talking about aren't fair. And that's as far as they went. But so it was a unanimous Supreme Court that ruled on this. In a concurring opinion, Justice Brett Kavanaugh, who coaches high school basketball and who tried out for the basketball team at Yale and didn't make it, has pretty strong feelings on this. He wrote a stinging dissent, essentially a bring me a case dissent, which the Supreme Court might be interested in given what happened here, in which he said that the NCAA had justified this limit on education-related expenses, saying fans won't like it if we pay our amateur athletes any more than the minimum necessary to ensure their education. And he said nowhere else in American business can a company get away with agreeing not to pay their workers a fair market rate on the theory that their product is defined by not paying their workers a fair market rate. The NCAA is not above the law. This is a blow to the NCAA, but it's not the big question. But it's pretty clear that this court thinks that the claim of amateurism is essential to the functioning of NCAA, of college athletics, just does not hold water. But this one only goes to education-related expenses.
And Terry, you said that this is a unanimous decision. What kind of impact do you think that has on just the way the American public views the court, particularly at a time when politics is so divided?
Yeah, that's a great question, because we've seen a lot of the justices come together this term on unanimous or very large majorities in unexpected cases. We saw that in the Obamacare case, the Affordable Care Act case, where Clarence Thomas joined with the liberals, as did two of the Trump appointees, Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett, to uphold the Affordable Care Act in that case. This is a court, it feels like, certainly at this point in the term, where many of the justices are looking for ways to come together, sticking to the finer points of the law rather than reaching for big opinions and staying out of politics. And in this one, you get the same sense as well. They were able to come together at this limited opinion. They didn't go beyond the lower court opinion, the lower court ruling, that college athletes, when it comes to education-related expenses, oughtn't to be limited because the NCAA claims that fans don't want these athletes paid for their work.
All right, and I want to go to ABC contributor Elsie Granderson. Elsie, I know you've covered sports for a long time here. This decision may be limited, but it could have a huge impact. What is the practical implication here for the college athlete?
Well, I think, the important thing to remember is that while we say the NCAA generally in terms of sports, we're really talking about the two real main sports that are the huge money drivers, football and basketball. And these are two sports that are dominated by players of color. And so it's almost impossible, Diane, to have this conversation about fairness and about antitrust laws without also acknowledging that there seems to be different standards for different sports as well. Case in point, I know from covering tennis that there have been a high number of international tennis players who happen to be from European countries allowed to have college scholarships while playing for universities, even if they have previous professional experience. But the NCAA doesn't get all over universities for tennis because those aren't money drivers. So it isn't just simply about the overarching conversation in terms of how does this impact players or impact college athletes, but it's also about how the NCAA picks and chooses when to enforce these rules based upon the sports and the profitability, which overall just sort of undergirds this notion that this amateurism that they keep hiding behind is really just BS, to be quite honest with you.
So, Terry, where does this concept of amateurism come from? And why does the NCAA and these conferences argue that it's so important to college sports?
Well, the NCAA will tell you that it's for the education of athletes, that they shouldn't receive compensation. But that's not really where it originated. If you look, a big part of the amateurism ethos in college sports was because to keep the working classes sort of out of this, that college sports were for college men. And college men didn't accept money it was more noble to be amateur somehow. And clearly that's gone out the window here because college coaches are the highest paid employees in 39 of the 50 states. And for so many of these college athletes, the schools insist on them putting the sports ahead of their education. The graduation rates have been a scandal in so many colleges and universities for so long. They use the labor of these young men. If they get injured, they just toss them out without any scholarship for education at all. And that ethos of amateurism was really based in a gentleman's understanding of what constituted an athlete, and really exists nowhere else in the world right now. And the notion that this was for athletics has been pointed out, as LZ just pointed out, it's kind of a sham in many ways. So this is an antiquated notion. Their other claim is that fans will reject college sports if they pay their players, and that is one that the Supreme Court will take up, I'm sure, at some point.
And Devin, from the school perspective, how does this decision impact how schools go about recruiting student athletes?
Yeah, a lot of small schools and colleges and universities, Diane, actually opposed the lifting of this cap because they were afraid that there was going to be an arms race. I mean, there already is an arms race in college sports for the best athletes who can get lured to certain schools based on how much the school can pay or provide in some of these perks. So this perhaps enhances that competition for some of the best athletes. But as Terry was alluding to and LZ certainly mentioned, I mean, the train is already moving out of the station on this issue of compensation for student athletes. We know that this summer in 6 states around the country, bills are already underway in those states to require colleges and universities, California among them, to mandate that students be allowed to profit off their image, name, and likeness, get endorsement deals with Nike and the like during their time. That's being mandated into law in some states, and so that train is moving. The NCAA has certainly seen that movement, acknowledged that movement, in some cases been supportive modestly of the name, image, likeness thing. But here, this is a much trickier situation and no doubt a disappointment to the league and to a lot of smaller schools that could face a harder time now getting some of these athletes to come play.
So, LZ, as Devin said, the train has left a station here. So what's next for college athletes with this decision now down from the Supreme Court? And how does this impact professional leagues going forward?
Well, I think for professional leagues, they are also very concerned about how the Supreme Court is going to rule going forward because it impacts their business model as well. For instance, in the NBA, which has a one-and-done rule, which means it requires high school students to spend 1 year at university or out of school playing professionally before they're allowed to be into the NBA draft. They also have a G League or a minor league system for players who do not want to wait that 1 year. So I suspect that as the NCAA continues to try to hold on to its power, that the NBA is going to find itself in a very unusual position of having to decide if it's going to help support the NCAA by keeping the one-and-done rule in place, forcing them to go to college, or if it relaxes that rule, that is essentially going to take all of those players who would have made a lot of money with their image playing in NCAA games, being able to control everything and going immediately into professional ranks where they can make as much money as possible. The NFL is different, Diane, because it still requires a 3-year gap out of high school, and that's basically based upon the physics, the physicality of it all. They want to make sure that your body matures. But if the NFL decides to start its own G League, if you will, or minor league system, that could gut all of the top talent that you see in college sports today, and essentially the NCAA would get what it wants, which is only players who aren't looking to make money off their image, but they won't be getting those best players as they have right now.
All right, LZ Granderson, Devin Dwyer, Terry Moran, thank you all. And once again, the Supreme Court has now ruled that the NCAA cannot cap what student athletes receive by way of educational gifts. The court has yet to decide anything about salaries for players. That is for another case. We will have additional updates coming up in just a few minutes at 11 a.m. Eastern and again at 3 p.m. Eastern on The Breakdown. Thank you all for joining us. I'm Diane Macedo. Have a great rest of the day.
Again, that was ABC News live report. So at this moment, California has been approved. Under consideration, Florida, Georgia, Illinois, Michigan, Missouri, Oklahoma, South Carolina, and Tennessee. Tune in tonight for more updates as State by State goes live. Pay for play.